Good morning, friends, family, and strangers, and welcome back to Nelly Niche, the channel where I talk about stuff and also things. Today, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. When are we not doing something different? But I thought it would be a good, fun idea to do a reading vlog. As you guys might know, one of my biggest, YouTube inspirations is Carrie Can Read. I love her videos so much. She's inspired me to read more. And so she said, if you're looking to get into booktube, which I'm not necessarily trying to put myself in that box, but it's a niche that I enjoy, to just do reading vlogs like this. So over the next few days, weeks, maybe these are pretty thick books, I'm going to be reading the Gideon the Ninth books. I don't actually know. The Locked Tomb trilogy, is that what the series is called? There's 3 books so far. I believe the author Tamsin Muir is writing another one, but if I like it, then I'll read that one when it comes out. But I believe that these work sort of on their own because we have Gideon the Ninth, followed by Harrow the Ninth, and then finally Nona the Ninth. And I assume each of these books kind of follows a different character. So I think it'll be all right. I don't think I'll be, who knows? Maybe it'll end on a huge cliffhanger and I'll be so mad that I did this before the last book came out. But that's what I'm going to be reading. Today is Sunday. I've got my tea in the Jurassic Park mug. I also have, what is this called? Oh my god, Burger, what is this? Oh, I also have chia seed pudding, you can see in my reused salsa jar. So I'll be eating my breakfast and reading and giving you my thoughts as I have them. See you soon. Something I forgot to mention is that the reason I bought these books is because Carrie recommended them, Icon, and also another YouTuber I watch, Strange Eons, recommended these in an ad for Audible. So it sounded right up my alley, sort of sci-fi fantasy, lesbians, very comedic books, I heard. And so I bought these for myself to read, but I also got them for Jake, my partner, to read because with his job, he has a lot of free time where he's on duty, but doesn't have something he has to be doing. And so he reads a lot. And I thought he would love these because he's a big fantasy head, also likes, a humorous book. But he read the first, I think, 90 pages of Gideon and he didn't like it. So I'm here to be the tiebreaker because I've heard such great things about these books, but I also really trust his judgment. So, if I don't like them, then he and I can bitch about them together. And if I do, then we can have friendly debates and I won't have wasted $30. So win-win. So right off the back, I am intrigued by the description in the book, which I'll read for you. Brought up by unfriendly, ossifying nuns, ancient retainers, and countless skeletons, Gideon, that's her, is ready to abandon a life of servitude and an afterlife as a reanimated corpse. She packs up her sword, her shoes, and her dirty magazines and prepares to launch her daring escape, but her childhood nemesis won't set her free without a service. Harrowhark Nonagesimus, Reverend daughter of the Ninth House and Bone Witch extraordinaire, has been summoned into action. The Emperor has invited the heirs to each of his loyal houses to a deadly trial of wits and skill. If Harrowhark succeeds, she will become, that's a nice typo there in the description, but it happens. If Harrowhark succeeds, she will become an immortal, all-powerful servant of the resurrection. But no necromancer can ascend without their cavalier. Without Gideon's sword, Harrow will fall and the Ninth House will die. Of course, some things are better left dead. So this seems like a lot. I kind of see where Jake's coming from. He said that it seemed like maybe it was just trying a little bit too hard, which I don't know about that. I'll see for myself. This is a lot. But I think I get the premise. We've got our two main characters, sort of like a bodyguard. I assume like bodyguard royalty, enemies to lovers, you know, if you're doing the tropes. But it's got some great reviews from all the typical publications, V.E. Schwab and some other authors. So that sounds good. And then it starts with Dramatis Personae in order of house appearance. So I think it's telling me like all of the characters, sort of like a family tree, but in a list format, which I don't know what a lot of these words mean, and they have crazy names. It definitely seems like there's some Latin influences, which I did take Latin in college. I wasn't good at it. But so there's 9 houses, and then there's also an emperor who is in charge of all of them. And each house seems to have like different roles in the society. So that's all. I'm not gonna go into this. I'm not gonna remember all these names. But they also all have like a really cute little skull like logo for each house that I'm sure kind of ties into what they're responsible for. But the 9th house is just a skull without a jawbone. So that's kind of interesting. And then we've got an epigraph, which isn't attributed to anyone. So maybe it's, you know, written by Tamsin. But it says, 2 is for discipline, heedless of trial. 3 for the gleam of a jewel or a smile. 4 for fidelity, facing ahead. 5 for tradition and debts to the dead. 6 for the truth over solace in lies. 7 for beauty that blossoms and dies. 8 for salvation no matter the cost. 9 for the tomb and for all that was lost. Is this talking about the houses? There is a first house that wouldn't be mentioned if that's the case. But I'm noticing that 7 is beauty that blossoms and dies. And the 7th house has a little rose. So that seems to be a connection. Cute little nursery rhyme thing. But okay, I'm gonna get into it. I'll check back in probably after the first chapter. So I'm 3 pages in, and here's what's going down. Our girl Gideon lives on the 9th, in the 9th kingdom, maybe planet? I don't know. This seems like more futuristic than, I mean, I knew it was kind of sci-fi, but it's an interesting kind of future where I don't know what her magazines are that she's packing up, because she's a sword girl, so they're not gun magazines. So are they just like publicity magazines? Are they cooking magazines? I don't know. There's a reference. She's going to escape today from this kingdom, and she takes off her security cuff and puts it on her pillow like a chocolate in a fancy hotel. So they have fancy hotels, which feels very current. But she's walking around, she's like messing up all the dirt in this courtyard, I guess, checking for, I assume, like security cameras. And she's up before everybody else, but she can hear everybody moving around. And there's this like bell that rings to wake everybody up. And then it seems like when they realize she's missing, they ring the bell again. And she has like a ride coming to shuttle her out to save her in 40 minutes. But then with 30 minutes left, I think, someone named Crux, who is the marshal of the House of the Ninth, comes and finds her, and she really does not seem concerned. So that's sort of interesting. But other things going on in this world are, it seems like a very religious place. Everybody has to do morning contemplation. But then in addition to these people, I don't know, she's like a reanimated corpse, I thought, so maybe she's not. But there's also just skeletons who seem to be like the manual laborers. So that's interesting. I'm gonna keep going. Okay, I'm like 20 pages in. I'm in the middle of chapter 3. But here's what we've learned. So that first person who found her, Crux, the marshal, they just like talked it out, and he left, and then another like soldiery person who is Gideon's teacher came and, you know, told her like, just come back, dude. And that doesn't work, so she leaves. And then finally, Harrow, the reverend daughter, heir to the Ninth House. Oh my god, wait, is it the Ninth House? Like the Lee Bardugo book? That's weird. Anyway, she comes out, and sort of what we learned is that Gideon has tried to escape like 80 times. The past 30 times, or maybe not in a row, but at least 30 of those times, she has tried to enlist in the military, I guess like the Empire's military. And that's what she's trying to do today. So the shuttle is coming to pick her up and take her to join the military as a soldier. And she's not a slave on this planet. She's an indentured servant. And so she like forged the signature basically saying she was allowed to go, which nobody's happy about. That's like why they're mad. And so we learn a little bit about her backstory is that she is not from this planet, and it is like a whole planet, the Ninth, and most of their civilization is in caves within the planet. But her mother just like it burst through the atmosphere 18 years ago and like had already passed like an hour before she landed or something. And Gideon was 1 day old. So Gideon's been here as an indentured servant ever since. Didn't have any necromancy powers, so she couldn't be like a religious figure. So I guess they're just training her to like be a soldier. But, so that's her story. She hates it here. She's tried to escape so many times. But so Harrow finally shows up. The shuttle's going to be here in like 5 minutes and offers her a deal, which is that those bells that were ringing, that wasn't for Gideon. That was for everyone to come together because there's some really important news happening, okay? And Harrow basically says, like, if you come to this meeting, then I will give you like a letter of commendation, basically, that would allow Gideon to enter at a much higher rank and get like better training for the military. And Gideon is still like, no, I'm getting out of here. Because Harrow is like the goth, but also maybe like, you know, toxic bad girl partner in one of these things. So like has bullied Gideon quite a bit over the years. Gideon calls her like a psychopath and that she would like eat a baby to keep Gideon locked up forever. So that's weird. But I like Harrow. She's edgy. She's very edgy. But so Harrow's like, okay, how about this? If you fight me right now, one-on-one, and I win, you come to this meeting and I'll still give you the commendation letter. If you win, you can leave right now with this letter that will like get you a lot further. That's legit. And so Gideon's like, fine, that's a great deal. Either way, I get this letter. And also Gideon is very confident that she can beat Harrow. And remember when I said she was like kicking around in the dirt, checking everything? It wasn't for security cameras. I don't think they have those. But it was for bones. Because I assume she knew that Harrow and other people with necromancy powers would try to stop her and that there might be a fight. And so she was making sure there weren't any like bones, weapons for these people who are against her. And she didn't find any, but then they fight and turns out it's full of bones. Harrow spent the whole night before putting bodies in the ground of this place, anticipating this last stand, I guess. So Gideon gets beat up and now she's being dragged to the big meeting. And two other things of note, and then I'm going to get back into it. But the magazines are like porn. They're just porn. There's like sexy lady magazines, which is kind of silly. I don't know. There was one part where they were like, where Gideon said, you can't charge me for any crimes. And somebody was like, well, your magazines are pretty lewd. So that was silly. But anyway, Now Gideon is like maybe concussed in this meeting, just looking at all the people, and we realize that there's very few people here. Gideon said that when she was a baby, there were 201 children on the planet, and now there's 3. So it seems like this planet is dying. Like it's in rough shape. It's just full of skeletons. And so she's looking around at various people in the room, like telling us sort of who they are. And we see like the king, or I guess the lord and lady of the house. And we learn that they are dead and that Harrow, their daughter, has reanimated them at some point over the last like 17 years and has basically like preserved them. And that is apparently really bad because earlier before the fight, Gideon had said, like, if you don't let me go, or if you try to bring me back, then I'm going to tell them the truth. And we both know, but the reader didn't know yet what that truth was. So that's interesting. That's the part that I just got to, basically, where it's revealed that, oh, she reanimated them. And that's like a big secret. Only like a few people know this. So I don't know how Gideon figured it out, but Gideon's one of the people that knows. And I'm going to keep going. While we were developing common sense, she studied the blade. Am I right, Griddle? Okay. Burger's here reading with me. Right, buddy? But anyway, I see what Jake was saying about how it seems like it's trying too hard. It is very funny, like I've heard, but it's so far funny in like a meme-y way, which I think I would prefer if it was funny in a way that like matches the world, but it's not gonna ruin it. I think I've already gotten further than Jake because I found his bookmark on page 50. So, but here's what's happened since I last checked in. The meeting that was called that Gideon was forced to go to was for a reading of a letter from the emperor saying that he is inviting, the heir of every kingdom, country, house, of which there are 8. The first house is the emperor. So there's 8 sort of beneath him. And it's inviting the heir of each house and their cavalier, which is like their personal guard, diplomat person. And so Harrow's cavalier is named Orstis, and he is a mama's boy. His dad was cavalier before him and was a lot better at it. Orstis is just like, I don't know. We don't really get to see him, but he's not very impressive. And his mom is like freaking out. She's like, I won't let him go. I know what happens to cavaliers. It's so dangerous. Like, you've already taken my husband from me. And then they pray, whatever. They are ushered out for causing a disruption. And Gideon's like, how are you going to get out of this one, dude? And Harrow's like, I'm going. And Gideon then says, I figured out your trick, which is that the signature she wrote on the commendation was her mother's. And that was to keep Gideon quiet, because if Gideon reveals that Harrow's mom is dead, then that contract won't be worth anything anymore. And Harrow's like, I didn't even think about that. I thought you were talking about the shuttle. And so it turns out that when they removed Orstis and his mother, they didn't let him, but they totally let them escape in Gideon's shuttle. And so she's stuck here. But she's devastated. She mopes for a week, and then Harrow has just come to pick her up and take her down to the crypts, I guess, where they are looking at all these like really messed up swords, and the crypt is full of like ancient machinery and generators that nobody knows how they work, but that's like how the planet is running. And so that's sort of adding to the mystery of like, what is going on in the ninth? Why why is everyone so old, and why are there so few people? Like, what's happening to them? We also learned that Harrow's parents committed S-word. So it wasn't an accidental or an illness. So they must have maybe known something was up, or just felt the despair that seems to be permeating this whole place. But anyway, Gideon and Harrow go down to the crypts where they're looking at all the weapons, and the captain of the guard, Gideon's teacher, is there. And she and Harrow are just kind of talking like, well, we need like a sword or a knife or powder or knuckle. Those are like the different fighting styles, I guess. And Gideon's kind of like, why am I here? What's going on? But of course, they are trying to get Gideon to become the Cavalier and go with Harrow. Oh my god, did I even finish talking about that? Anyway, the Emperor has called the heir and Cavalier of every kingdom to come to his planet, I guess, and like study or compete to be his lictors, which I guess is probably like, I don't know, parliament, some like a lot more political power. And so anyway, they're trying to get Gideon to come with Harrow to go do that. But she doesn't know how to fight with that type of sword. And so I think we're about to enter a training montage. So that's all for now. I simply don't believe they have pizza in this world. They eat like gruel and oatmeal, which on the first page Gideon described as deliciously gray. They don't have pizza. I just finished chapter 7, thought we'd do a little bit of a catch up. The training montage was short. Basically, they're just trying to teach Gideon the very specific ways she needs to do her makeup, the very specific like sword fighting stances and things like that. And she's got to wear her robes and really just kind of be silent and follow Harrow around, which of course she hates. But the time passes. They have about 3 months to prepare. And then they take their ship to the first house, which is very interesting. So nobody lives here, I don't believe. There might be a few priests there who kind of tend to it, but the emperor doesn't actually live there. It's basically abandoned. And I want to read you a little description of it from the beginning of chapter 8. Everything in that room was beautiful, and all had gone to seed. It wasn't like back in the ninth, where unbeautiful things were now old and ruined to boot. The ninth must have always been a corpse, and corpses putrefied. The house of the first had been abandoned, and breathlessly waited to be used by someone other than time. The floors were of wood, where they weren't of gold-shot marble or a rainbow mosaic of tiles gone leprous with age and disrepair. And enormous twin staircases jutted up to the floor above, spread with narrow, moth-eaten rugs. Vines peeked through in number where the glass of the ceiling had cracked, spreading tendrils that had since gone gray and dry. The pillars that reached up to support the shining glass were carpeted thickly with moss, still alive, still radiant, all orange and green and brown. It obscured old portraits on the walls in spatters of black and tan. It hung atop an old dry fountain made of marble and glass, 3 tiers deep, a little bit of standing water still skulking in the bottom bowl. I just think that's beautiful. I really do like this author's writing style, apart from Pizza Face and, you know, those little things like that aren't, you know. But this description was lovely, and I think a lot of the sentence structure is really powerful. So I don't know, I'm gonna keep going. I'm enjoying it so far. In chapter 7, they sort of briefly got a glance of the Adept, which is like the name of the heir, I guess, and the Cavalier from the 3rd house and the 7th house. So the 3rd house, which I'm gonna look up what they are, but the 3rd house, there were 2 young women who came out, as well as a cavalier. So that was a discrepancy, and they weren't allowed to come to the planet until later, which is why they're kind of the only ones that Harrow and Gideon have seen. But it seems like the girls are twins, and so that house, I guess, decided that they would send both of them, which could prove a problem at the end of the day. But the priest who like greets Gideon and Harrow says like, well, that's their problem. Let's see, the third house is the mouth of the emperor, the procession, house of the shining dead. So I don't know what that means. It sounds like the third house is kind of cocky. And yeah, there's 2 heirs there. And then we meet the 7th house, which is the joy of the emperor, the rose unblown. And we meet them because the heir like falls out of the shuttle onto a priest and like is bleeding from the mouth. And so Gideon, they're right next to the 9th shuttle. So Gideon rushes over and like catches her because this old feeble priest cannot support her. And then is immediately like threatened by her cavalier, by the 7th cavalier. So that's kind of fun. But Dulcinea, who is the heir of the 7th, she seems like a real sweetie. She also has some sort of blood illness that will take her life very soon. Like, the fact that she's even lived this long is kind of surprising. Don't know what's going on there. But yeah, I think I forgot to save my place. But I'm just gonna keep on trucking. And if you hear something, that I'm making rice to eat with my leftover curry. I finished Act 1, and then I took a little break for lunch to watch some YouTube. Burger's here. Say hi, Burger. But basically all you need to know from the end of Act 1 is that they gather all the people together, and somebody says, like, so what are we doing? What are we doing to like train to achieve lictorhood? And the priest is like, I'll show you. The little priest looked at them again. Well, I don't know, he said. So that's great. It's just supposed to come to them as they are on this planet all together. So that's fun. Then they all go to sleep, and I'm gonna dive into Act 2. It's giving Crowley from Good Omens. He likes it. Right, buddy? You like the book? So handsome. Oh. This weird door seems important. And I forgot to say, the only rule that the priests on this planet gave them was not to go in any doors that are locked. And this one is locked. So Gideon peers through the keyhole and doesn't see anything, but it's really weird. This is the thing, right? You see here, Gideon descended like an avenging necrosaint as she rose. I feel like that's the in-universe avenging angel, right? So the author's clearly got some ideas, but then there's still pizza. And I was just texting Jake about the book, and we're on the same page that it reads like Tumblr posts in Gideon's voice, which isn't like a bad thing, but it really doesn't fit with the universe. 2 pages later, resting bitch face. Checking in, I'm on page 143 out of like 440, so not super far in. But the past like 60, 70 pages have all been them in this palace on the first house, and Harrow basically immediately disappeared. She's wandering around. We don't know. Gideon does not know. She just left a note saying like, don't bother me, don't talk to anyone. So Gideon's also completely all alone, can't speak to people, which is a good thing, because if she did, she'd be revealing some things. But we get to meet sort of all the other people who are here for the most part. We don't really see a lot of the second house, but we know it's like 2 young women, I guess. And the second house, it seems, is like the cavalry. They are the army. The second house is where Gideon wanted to end up on when she was trying to escape with the shuttle. The third house has those twins, which is unconventional, not really supposed to do that. But one of them is like beautiful, resplendent, like charismatic, and the other one is just like a washed out version of her, but it seems like that's the smart one. And then their cavalier is a really good fighter. The fourth house is, they're both really young. I'm guessing like 14, 15, a young prince, and then his cavalier is a woman, a young woman. And they're cute. I like them. Because the fifth cavalier is an older man. He's probably in his 30s, named Magnus. And he like is friends with these kids and he's like being dad, you know? And they are just like cringing whenever he says anything. They're like, Magnus, don't talk about me, God. So that's why I think like 14. And then, so his adept is what like the heirs are called, is also his wife. So that's cute. We haven't really met her. We haven't seen anything of the sixth for most of this. We don't know anything about them. The seventh is our woman, our sickly woman who Gideon saved, like caught when they first arrived. And she and Magnus are really the only 2 people who are like friendly towards Gideon. She likes to sit on the terraces and read her romance books, which I think it's implied, or I guess stated, that like Gideon's porn magazines and comic books come from the seventh, so they seem like the artists, and also just, I don't know, the romantics. But yeah, so she's always like lounging on terraces, and whenever she sees Gideon, she's like, Gideon, come move this pillow for me, or like, come help me with something. So that's kind of cute. The eighth we've only seen once, and they hate the ninth. Like, a lot of these houses don't really seem to like the ninth because they're like, I don't know, weird religious zealots. I mean, everybody's a necromancer, so I don't know why the ninth is too far. But anyway, they like won't eat in the same room as her. If she passes them in the hallway, they like flatten themselves up against the wall. And that's pretty much everybody. And so, you know, Gideon's walking around, she's not talking to people, just kind of getting the lay of the land, training a lot. And the beautiful twin from the third says, we're doing some sparring matches with the Cavaliers. I've put a little something together. So she goes and like fights Magnus, beats him in 3 moves, but then she fights the Cavalier from the third, who's like a pretentious guy, I don't know, and he beats her with like some crazy moves. So the third seems pretty intense. But so that all happens, and she realizes that Harrow has not been in their room in like over 24 hours. She never sees Harrow, but like the bed sheets are rumpled differently every day. So she knows that she's coming back to like sleep, but she hasn't come back. And so Gideon goes out. There's something weird on the floor. Gideon goes out to try to like track her down, hopefully to find her dead body, because remember, they hate each other. And she finds this like crazy path and overhears the Cavalier and the Adept from the sixth talking, and they are like hunched over this hatch in the floor. And then they like spot her. She fights with the Cavalier, but then gets called off. And they tell her Harrow has been like going into this hatch. We saw her blood. She's probably not dead, but we think she's still down there. And they have a key. And something I forgot to mention way back is, in addition to the one rule the priests gave them of don't open any doors that are locked, which the wording of that was very specific. They gave all the Cavaliers a metal ring about this big, and they were like, what is this? And then they were like, we don't know. But so Harrow had taken Gideon's ring the first night they were there, like while she was asleep. So, but it turns out that's a key ring because these people from the 6th have a key to this hatch that we're assuming Harrow must also have. And so they go down. She's like all curled up in a little bone bed, a bed that she's crafted out of bones, just like passed out. And so Gideon has just scooped her up, brought her back. So we've finally really met at least a little bit of all the other people here. And it seems like we might be getting ready for our 2 main girls to like actually start working together. Even though they hate each other, Gideon like was focused on saving Harrow or figuring out what was wrong because, you know, enemies to lovers. That's I know that's where this is headed. But also there's just so many hot girls here. God damn, Gideon's having a great time looking at all these hot ladies. But anyway, just rescued Harrow, and I'm gonna keep going. Talk to you soon. Right, the wording of the rule was they can't go through a locked door without permission. Let's go. This author knows the difference between supine and prone and used it correctly. Checking in again, page 166. So after Harrow woke up, she tells Gideon, you know, unwillingly, but eventually just gives in and tells Gideon that the very first like hours they were there, she mapped the whole entire castle. She counted over 200 doors, of which only 6 are locked, including that vault. And she literally asked for permission from, they call him teacher, is like the priest. And so he gave her the key. So that was the point of that like rule, is just ask for permission, be brave. But it seems like the other very serious necromancers from the other houses did something very similar. So the 6th was like right behind her. The washed out girl from 3, the 3rd house, is, you know, snooping around doing her own thing, as well as the 8th, which are the assholes who don't like the 9th. So that's going on, and Gideon basically says, if you're going back in there, you have to take me with you. And finally Harrow like agrees. And so they go back down the hatch, and Gideon realizes that this place, or really Harrow tells her that this place is for experiments, necromantic experiments. And so Harrow has been doing these experiments, which is why she like exhausted herself and passed out. And the experiment we're doing today in one of the laboratories is Harrow basically sends in some bones and then animates them into skeletons to fight something, but she can't see what it is. So she can't figure out like what her skeletons need to be programmed to do. So Gideon, being there, can look through the observation window and see what's in there. And it's like this weird bone beast thing. And Gideon's like, I want to fight it. Put me in, coach. And Harrow's like, no. And then Gideon like sneaks in basically in place of one of the skeletons and tries to fight it. And it regenerates. So she can't really get an edge. And she's talking to Harrow through like a speaker system. But Harrow is like freaking out. And so what we learn is that the point of this test is not, can you design a skeleton that can fight really good? It's about like seeing through a person who's in that room. Like your cavalier or a soldier is in that room fighting the beast, and then the necromancer is supposed to like see and feel through their senses in order to pinpoint like which aspects of this creature need to be unraveled so it stops regenerating. So that's our new plan, but Harrow passes out before we can try it again. So I think we're gonna do that tomorrow in the book. But crazy experiments. It's really picking up. I mean, the language issue is still an issue, and I feel like the people who recommended this book recommended it because it's so funny. And it is funny, don't get me wrong. It's just not doing it for me, but I will say the plot and like the vibes are doing it for me. So I'm glad I kept going. Maybe I'll get Jake to try it again, just tell him to skip to the page 100. But it's interesting. A lot of the necromancy stuff is like going over my head, but it's fun. It's a good time. Yeah. Okay, I just finished Act 2 of who knows how many. And basically all that's happened since I last updated was Magnus and his wife Abigail, the necromancer and cavalier from the 5th house, invited everybody to a party to hang out, eat good food, because it's their 11th anniversary. And so Gideon convinces Harrow to go to this for like political gains, but also Gideon just wants to eat good food. But so they go to that, have to like awkwardly mingle and talk with people, but it's a good time. And then Harrow like storms out after a couple hours because the gross guy from the 8th told Abigail that he knows something about like the lower levels, which is where the hatch is, or where the hatch leads. And so Harrow storms out and she's like, we don't have time to waste. Like, that's going to be another competitor on our trail. I guarantee she'll find the hatch in the next few hours. So they go and they figure it out. They defeat the beast. They actually have a nice moment where Harrow's like, you are, like, I got to literally feel you fighting and you are a good fighter. And Gideon's like, you can't be nice to me. I still hate you. And Harrow's like, well, yeah, you still have a terrible personality. You're just a good fighter. So anyway, you know where this is going. And so then they're leaving. And what do they see at like the base of the ladder? Abigail and not Marcus. They see Abigail and Magnus's dead bodies at the bottom of the ladder. Things are getting tense. I should have known, right? You finally make me like think these people are really cute, and then immediately, that same day, take them away. But so anyway, that's where we're at. End of Act 2. I think I'm gonna get some food real quick and then keep going. It's getting really good. There are guns. The implications. And maybe cigarettes? Unclear, but that's my hunch. And electric toothbrushes. I should say they're finding all this stuff in the secret room that their key unlocked. After the deaths, all the necromancers got together, tried to bring them back, couldn't do it, and now they've unlocked their secret door. So that's where they're finding all this stuff. This is weird. This is just a small segment of a note that Gideon found in that untouched living quarters that seemingly hasn't been used for thousands of years. Kind of strange. I shouldn't be surprised at this point, but this one got me, I'll be real. The Mean Girls reference in zombie skeleton land. But that's okay. This one's pretty good. I'm on page 246, so over halfway, only about 200 pages left in the first book. And the only major update is that they got another key. They teamed up with the woman with cancer, the sick woman, Septimus. She already knew how to get the key, but wasn't physically able to do it. And so Harrow and Gideon got it. They got to use the key first, but then are expected to give it to Septimus. And how they did that was siphoning. So Harrow had to like cross this room that would kill her, would like suck out all of her, I don't know, water. And so she was like siphoning Gideon's energy from outside the room to get across. So Gideon like almost died. She's feeling better. While she was resting, Harrow has gone to this other room and we don't know what she's found yet. But the people from the 6th house, so like the nerdy weirdos, did I talk about them? I must have. Who I like a lot. I think they're fun. They kind of remind me of like Beatty from Hunger Games Catching Fire, you know? They're like the smart ones who are a little weird. But anyway, they've been looking after her, and there was a bit of a confrontation in the dining room where they were getting some food in her, which is that some people, Gideon included, had not realized what I realized and what the smart people here realized, is that obviously there's a limited number of keys. I think there's going to be 10 secret rooms because there's 10 laboratories, but I'm not sure. But anyway, these like special room keys, there's a limited number. And so we believe like people with more keys are going to be in danger because people with less keys might kill them to get their keys. So that's where we're at. We also learned that Septimus, sick lady, also has 2 keys, but I don't know if that's counting the one that we have split custody over. So maybe we are in the same boat, or maybe she's got 1 extra. And then they go into the morgue, which is like through the fridge of the dining area. And number 6 man is like checking Magnus's body again, because when they were found, their keys, or their key ring, was missing. We don't think they had any keys, so we're wondering why someone would kill them just to get a key to the laboratory. It could be coronavirus. That's not her name, but there's a girl named Corona, the pretty blonde, the like sexy one. So that's my theory, but I don't know. The 8th is also still scary and weird. Moving on. Hi. I'm in my car on my lunch break from work, and I actually finished Gideon the Ninth a week ago. So like this time last week, I finished it at work because I only had like 30 pages left. And then I just got really busy, didn't want to film, but I'm really ready to start Harrow the Ninth, and so I want to get this out of the way, start editing it, so then I have space to record more. So it was fuzzy when I was reading it, and it's still even fuzzier now, but I have my notes on my iPad, on my lap, that I will read to you, just so that you are up to date with how the book ended. So wherever I left you off, shortly after, the teens from the 4th house found a dead body, or like human remains, in the incinerator of the kitchen, like the waste incinerator. And so they're freaking out, but it's unclear like if somebody was even burned. They're pretty sure, but all they can find is like ash, but it's like a little greasy, you know, like meat people. But at the same time, we realize that the 7th Cavalier is missing. And so we're thinking probably he was burned up in there. And 7, the 7th house adept, was also kind of missing, but they found her. She was like in one of her courtyards, just collapsed. It had started raining. She didn't have anyone to help her, and she fell and she couldn't get up. And so she's in like really rough shape. Her sickness is like progressing rapidly. And so she's up in a sick bed. Oh, a leaf. That was lovely. And the 8th house go to her and like take her keys. Like she gives them to them, is what he says. So now that's weird. And when they come back with the keys, everybody's like, okay, we're gonna start dueling for keys. We're just gonna fight. The 2nd house has nothing, no keys. 6 and 4 and 9, so our main characters, the teens and like the cool nerds, have sort of a tentative alliance as they're trying to figure out where all the keys are. And so our threats kind of right now are 3 and 8, because 7 is like in her sick bed and also, you know, was kind of friends with Gideon. So we're worried about the 3rd house, which is the twins and their cavalier, and then the 8th, who are just like the racist bad guys. By the end of Act 3, the teens are dead, which is very sad. So like the people from 6 and Harrow are guarding Lady Septimus of the 7th house, and Gideon takes the teens down to the laboratory thing, down the hatch, to do some, I guess, to look for the 7th Cavalier. But they're attacked by a giant skeleton monster, and both the teens are murdered, which is very sad. They like got me attached to them and then immediately ripped them away. So then after that, 6 and 9 have like an even closer kind of alliance. They agree basically to an information trade. So we learn that the 6th house has 3 keys and the 9th only has 1, because remember they had like 1 key that they got together with the 7th house, and so they used it first, Harrow used it, and then gave it to the 7th. So that means that 8 now has it, meaning 8 has 3 keys. But so that means that 1 key is missing and we don't know where it is. After that like conversation, Harrow forbids Gideon from going to see her lady friend, Lady Septimus, and they are beefing majorly. They're not having a good time, but Harrow does not trust Lady Septimus. And so because she's so angry, Gideon like betrays Harrow and goes to tea with the 8th house, which they had like invited her. You know, if you want to learn the truth about how much 9th house sucks, come have tea with us. So she goes, and she does get some information out of them, which is that, you remember at very beginning of the book, Gideon had a shuttle that she was going to take off planet, but then the Cavalier primary, who was like supposed to be doing this job, and his mother left on the shuttle. What we learned from the 8th is that that shuttle exploded and they died. And also he brings to her attention, isn't it kind of weird that every single kid in your generation died except for you and Harrow? Don't you think that's weird? And she was like, yeah, that is kind of weird. After this, Silas asks for her keys, which obviously that was going to happen, and Gideon is holding on to the key. But his Cavalier refuses to fight Gideon, because when she like showed up at their door, he swore on his honor that no harm would come to her. And he says like, I'm a Cavalier and all I have is my honor. So she gets out, and they have, you know, some sort of tense conversation that we're not privy to, but she's still mad at Harrow. So she keeps walking around. She runs into their teacher. They have like a little chat. I don't really know. She runs into Corona, who is like the pretty twin, who is like swinging a sword around in the training room, which necromancers don't really do swords. So that's weird. But then her Cavalier comes in and like stops her and is like, settle down, and Gideon leaves. At which point she's cooled down enough. She's still mad at Harrow. She still hates Harrow because that's their whole thing. But she goes back to their rooms and Harrow's not there. But in her closet, in Harrow's closet, Gideon finds the missing Cavalier's head. Just his head. Bad. So then she immediately like rushes to the 6th because she trusts them, tells them everything she knows, including like things outside of this castle that they're in, including the secret of Harrow's parents' death, which like pretty much nobody knew. And she also shows them the weird note she found in the lab that had her name on it. At which point Camilla brings Harrow in handcuffs, but turns out Harrow and the 6th are still tight. The group of them gathers everybody up. Gideon is still so confused, like what's going on? But they bring everybody to Septimus's sick bed, where she reveals at their prompting that her Cavalier was already dead. He died before arriving on this planet, and she has like reanimated his corpse basically, and he's just been walking around. So it's not a question of like who killed him anymore, because he was already dead, but we're still kind of wondering like, how did he stop being reanimated, right? And also Harrow, I guess, stumbled upon him, literally just like touched him, and his head fell off. So that's why she has the head. And after this, everybody leaves. They're all like, whoa, that's crazy. And Gideon and Harrow have a heart-to-heart. in the saltwater pool, because that's like some tradition that Harrow got from her mother, is like tell secrets in salt water, which is kind of beautiful. And this is when Harrow tells her everything, which isn't a whole lot, but it's still like everything that can be shared. She shares. Harrow says that she knew immediately that the 7th Cavalier was a puppet, and that's why she didn't trust Lady Septimus. Fair. And that she didn't tell Gideon because she didn't know, she thought that Gideon would like leave her because it seemed like she was more loyal to the 7th house lady than to her own Cavalier, because they beef constantly, majorly. Gideon asks Harrow about the children dying, and we learn that her parents, like her family, intentionally killed all those kids, like with a sickness. And that was so that Harrow could be born, so that they could conceive Harrow as like a powerful necromancer. It required a lot of death energy. So Gideon was supposed to die as well, but somehow she was like immune to this sickness. And so that's like why Harrow's parents hated her so much, just because they were like, it reminded them of their guilt, and also they were like, what the fuck is up with this girl that she's like immune? That's weird. So Harrow clearly has some like self-hatred about this. It doesn't feel good for her. But after that, we learn that, or no, actually, never mind. We learned this a little bit earlier, is that Harrow's parents killed themselves because Harrow opened the locked tomb, that like their whole cult is centered around this tomb being locked. And she was 10 years old, precocious, intelligent. She wanted to know what was in there, and she went in there. And Gideon saw her, and Gideon told her parents, and then her parents committed suicide. And Harrow reveals that she had to go through a lot of like trials and spells and wards to get deeper into the tomb, but all she saw there was like a young woman, a body on ice, and that's it. And like allegedly whatever was kept inside the tomb is like the only thing that could kill God, and it's just this woman. Then we're back to business, back to the action. 6 and 9 break into one of the rooms, the locked rooms, but shortly after, the fire alarm goes off, which they all like take very seriously as, I don't know, like cave dwelling people. They're like, closed spaces, very dangerous. We need to go like check it out. And as they're running through the castle, they see that all of the skeleton servants have like collapsed. They're just piles of bones. Whatever task they were doing is left to the wayside. And they realize that like the fire alarm is just going off because the skeleton collapsed that was cooking and left the stove on. So they turn the stove off. There's no fire, thank goodness. Then they go to the 7th adept's room, Lady Septimus, and the priest guy who was watching her is dead. And she's like, I don't know what's going on. This is crazy. And so they go deeper into the priest's quarters. They see that the other two are also dead, and they also find that the 2nd house is like killed the main priest guy, and are also dying themselves in like some sort of battle. This fight happened because they knew like the only way to get messages out must have been in the priest's quarters, so they went there and they called the emperor to take care of business. And then they were killed for it. They're actively dying. Actually, I think the cavalier's dead, and like the captain is dying. And then the 8th house shows up and says that the 3rd house has defiled a body. They go to the morgue, cut into Abigail's body. So they went to the morgue, cut into Abigail's body, and found the missing key. And so what we realize is that when Abigail and Magnus, the 5th house, were killed, it wasn't when they were arriving in the lab, it was when they were leaving the lab, having gotten a key. And like either Abigail swallowed this key to hide it, or whoever killed her like made her swallow it or planted it in her body somehow. And then everybody makes it to the last room that, like, that key unlocked, because remember, Ianthe and the third stole it, where they see, like, the third's cavalier dead on the ground, Ianthe standing over him, Corona Beth, like, sobbing. And we learn that she has done something terrible and crazy. You know how each of these labs has, like, some new complicated necromantic theory that, like, I don't fully understand? Well, so in this one, the necromancer has to kill their cavalier, and, like, probably in a specific way, but, you know, and then, like, absorb their spirit and their power. And so now Ianthe is, like, way more powerful. She's got all her necromancy powers, but then she also, like, has her guy's amazing sword powers. They have, like, a big battle, and she kills both of the people from the 8th house. Well, kind of. Like, they both die. And the 9th house and the 6th house leave, except the guy, Adept, isn't with them. They head to the 7th because they figure that's the only place he must have gone. And on the way, we, like, learn a little bit, which is that the 6th house guy actually proposed to Lady Septimus a few years back, and she said no, thank you. But they, like, have exchanged lots of letters. And Gideon is, like, her soul is crushed. She feels so guilty, which is so silly. She just flirted a little bit. Like, it's not like they hooked up. I don't know. But she feels very guilty for her crush. And anyway, they go in the room, and Lady Septimus is not Lady Septimus. Actually, they don't go in the room. Actually, Gideon is so hurt by this that she's like, you guys, like, let me go talk to him first. Let me go apologize. And they're like, okay. And so she makes it to the 7th room, but, like, her body freezes up and she can't go in, but she can overhear their conversation, where it is revealed that the Lady Septimus is not, in fact, the Lady Septimus. Even though he had, like, proposed, he had never actually seen her, so he wouldn't have known this. But she was always, like, kind of distant, you know? So anyway, it turns out that this is someone who has assumed the 7th house adept's identity, and she killed the 5th house to protect her secret, because the necromancer Abigail is also, like, a historian and would have recognized her face. She killed the 4, and she's doing this, like, house by house, because she's trying to get the emperor to come here by destroying his, like, loyal houses one by one. And it turns out her name is Cytherea, and, or Cytherea. There's a pronunciation guide in the book, but I left it at home because it's been a week since I read it. Anyway, and she was one of the original lictors, so she's 10,000 years old, and she wants to kill the emperor. But before she can do that, the 6th house guy, like, advances her cancer, which she, like, does actually have. Like, the Lady 7th also actually had it, but she's, like, maybe part of the same family. So he, like, makes her blood cancer go even faster, and then he explodes. But she still gets out. And then there's a big battle, lots of battling. Harrow manages to stop the big, like, bone construct that has been killing all these people. Cytherea is about to kill Camilla. Sad. I love Camilla. But Ianthe shows up, and, like, they fight. Eventually, like, I don't know, Cytherea's still alive. And then the book basically ends with Gideon, like, killing herself. There's, like, a spiky fence. They're in another fucking courtyard. And she's like, the only way that we can stop this beast is if Harrow, like, absorbs my soul, like how Ianthe did. And so they have, like, a touching eye contact thing. And then, I don't know, Harrow eats Gideon. And then defeats Cytherea. But then Gideon disappears, which, like, we see in Ianthe that her cavalier, his soul is still, like, very much in her and is, like, fighting her a little bit. She's stronger, but it's weird that Gideon, like, disappeared from Harrow after that. And then we get the epilogue, in which literal God is there and he's talking to Harrow. And what we learn from this is that she and Ianthe are the only confirmed survivors. And also she's a lictor now. Hooray! Okay, that's all. I'm starting the second book. I'll probably give you a big update tonight. We'll see.